Black family vanished after a birthday party in 1988. 8 years later, this turns up inside a chimney. There's a house on the outskirts of Sampson, Alabama, a 2-lane town most folks pass through without realizing they've left one county and entered another. You won't find much on a map. Maybe a faded chevron, a diner called Jean's, and a post office that shuts its doors at 3:00 p.m. on the dot. No stoplights, no hospital, just a line of low homes that look like they've been there since the day the South stopped breathing. But there's one house no one talks about, not anymore. Not the one with the caved-in porch or the swing still creaking from storms past, but the one just a little past the pecan grove where the road begins to narrow and the kudzu starts to rise like green ghosts reclaiming wood and brick. That's where the Morris family lived, or rather, where they were last seen. July 18, 1988. It was a Monday. That part always stuck with me. Birthdays falling on a Monday just feel a little lonelier, don't they? The Morris family had gathered at their house to celebrate their youngest, Elise, turning 7. A small party, just close friends, a few neighbors, balloons strung over the mailbox, a vanilla cake with pink frosting. The kind of day you forget until you don't. By sundown, all 4 family members, David Morris, his wife Celeste, their 10-year-old son Jaron, and little Elise, had vanished. Not a sound, not a note, no tire marks, no signs of struggle. Just a leftover cake with half-melted candles and 4 sets of shoes left neatly by the front door. For years, the house sat untouched. The official story, if you can even call it that, was voluntary disappearance. Sheriff Kearns told Channel 6 that the family may have moved on, despite the fact that no bank accounts were touched, no suitcases taken, and no relatives notified. But here's what most people outside Sampson never knew. This wasn't the first time something went wrong in that house. Back in 1952, the house belonged to a man named Lowell Candler, a retired train conductor who once swore he found a child's shoe inside his chimney, one he didn't recognize. He'd never had children. Lived alone since his wife died in '49. People said he started drinking after that. But I remember him as sharp as a tack. He told my uncle once, that house keeps things. Things you ain't ready to know you lost, but I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's go back to the Morrises. The week after their disappearance, flyers went up. Search parties were organized, mostly local volunteers. The family's church, St. Agnes Baptist, held a vigil that Sunday, and a woman named Miss Claudia said she dreamt Elise was still inside the house. Hiding in the walls, nobody listened. The police searched the perimeter, checked hospitals, and even brought in dogs. Nothing. The front door was unlocked. All 4 beds made, birthday cards still stacked by the mantel. A VHS tape, home footage from the party, was found in the VCR, but the tape ended abruptly around 6:41 p.m. right after Elise blew out the candles. There was no one behind the camera anymore when it stopped recording. Then came silence, 8 years of it. The house was foreclosed in '89, but no one bought it. A few teenagers broke in over the years, but never twice. One swore he saw a girl's handprint on the inside of the fireplace glass. Another claimed he heard singing, but no one believed him. You wouldn't either, unless you heard it yourself. And then in June of 1996, everything changed. A man named Alan Rudd from Dothan bought the house for dirt cheap, planning to flip it. He was the kind of guy who looked at every creaking floorboard as profit margin, every loose tile as character. He didn't believe in ghosts or history or warnings. He just wanted square footage and a return on investment. He lasted 3 days. On the 4th day, during chimney repair, a worker named Miguel Alvarez found something lodged behind a collapsed brick near the flue. It wasn't much at first, just fabric, dusty, stiff, and packed into the cracks like it had been used to muffle something. Then he saw the stitching, small, striped, familiar. The striped shirt belonged to Jaron. The pink dress, Elise's. Every piece of clothing the Morris family had been wearing in the birthday photo was found packed into that chimney. Filthy, scorched at the edges, some still smelling of soot and mold. Their names were still written on the inside tags in Celeste's careful handwriting. The sheriff's report listed 4 garments, a beige button-down, a yellow dress, dark pants, and a striped t-shirt. No blood, no bodies, just their clothes. And here's the part no one put in the papers. The clothes weren't aged 8 years. At least not like you'd expect. Fibers were intact, stains still fresh under forensic light. It was like they'd been sealed in a vacuum, untouched by time. Miguel quit the same day. Alan Rudd walked off the property and never came back. The house hasn't been touched since. The chimney was resealed. Quietly. No press conference, no public statement. Just a signed affidavit that the materials had been logged and returned to evidence, and a note that investigation remains open. But everyone in Sampson knows that chimney was trying to tell us something. We just weren't ready to listen. And that was the last official word on the Morris family. But it's not the end of the story, because in October 2003, a woman named Camille Boyd, who had been a teenager at Elise's birthday party, began receiving postcards, unmarked, no return address, no handwriting, just typewritten words, 3 cards in total, each one with a date, a time, and a phrase. The first one read, July 18, 1988, 6:41 p.m., you were looking the wrong way. The second, everything burns except memory. And the third, check the vent in Elise's old room. Behind the panel, she didn't tell anyone at first, not the police, not her husband, just drove back to Sampson, parked 2 houses down from the old Morris place, and broke in after midnight. She never made it past the 2nd floor. Neighbors say they saw her lights flash once, then go out. Her car was found 2 days later, empty. Driver's side door cracked open. 1 shoe left behind, toe pointed toward the front steps. She hasn't been seen since. The official reopening of the case happened quietly. No sirens, no press conference, no yellow tape stretched across the porch rails like you see on TV, just a single line in the county clerk's ledger. Morris case, active review, June 18, 96. Initials, RTM. That was Detective Russell T. Minton, 53 years old at the time. A man who'd already buried 2 marriages and spent more than 30 years chasing ghosts across Alabama's forgotten corners. He had a habit of smoking menthols out the window of his car and talking to suspects like they were old friends from high school. He didn't believe in bad luck, just unfinished work. Minton remembered the Morris disappearance. Everyone in Sampson did. But he remembered something else too. Something the files never mentioned, the VHS tape. Back in 1988, when the original search was underway, a deputy had recovered a camcorder from the Morris living room. No one had bothered to digitize it. It had sat in a brown evidence box marked media, playback needed, gathering dust in basement storage. Minton requested it be pulled. When they finally got a working player from the high school's AV club, the tape played fine. A little static, some light tracking issues, but the footage was intact. 6:32 p.m. Elise is laughing, Celeste is cutting the cake, David pours punch into red paper cups. Jaron runs past the camera with a balloon stuck to his head. Then the footage skips. A hard jump. 6:41 p.m. The room is empty, no voices, no movement, just a faint hum, maybe from the TV. And the camera keeps rolling. For 7 full minutes, no one enters the room. No one speaks. Then at 6:48 p.m. a shadow crosses the edge of the frame. But there's no source, no movement, no explanation. The video ends abruptly, as if someone pulled the tape while it was still recording. Minton watched it 4 times in one sitting. On the 5th he noticed something. In the lower right corner, just past the table beneath the curtain, a shoe, a small child's shoe, turned on its side, like it had been taken off in a hurry. He paused the frame, enhanced it, zoomed in. It matched the exact shoe that would later be found lodged between the flue bricks in the chimney. Same size, same logo, same faded blue stripe across the heel. There was no forensic evidence to explain how the shoe got from the living room to a sealed chimney. But Minton didn't need evidence, he needed answers. The first visit. On June 21, 1996, Minton returned to the Morris house for the first time since the initial search. He brought 2 crime scene technicians and a locksmith. The air inside was heavy, not from dust but from something else, like breath held too long. The furniture was still there, moth-bitten couch, floral wallpaper, and that same crooked ceiling fan that always creaked on the 3rd rotation. They started upstairs. Elise's bedroom was the door on the left. Pink wallpaper faded to bone, stuffed bear on the shelf, missing one eye, a ribbon nailed above the closet. But the vent cover, the one Camille Boyd had mentioned in her postcard before she vanished, that was the key. It was slightly loose. 2 of the screws were newer than the others. When they removed it, a folded sheet of paper fell out, not yellowed, not moldy, crisp on the front, in typed ink. You stopped looking too soon, that was it. No signature, no date, no fingerprints, but someone had been in that house since 1988 and had taken steps to make sure this clue would surface only when they wanted it to. Minton called in favors, pulled old utility records, phone logs, property transfers. And that's when the second anomaly surfaced. The house was never empty. Between 1989 and 1996, the house had reportedly been vacant. That's what the bank claimed, what the county claimed. But the electricity had been turned on 6 separate times, always in the winter, never for more than 3 weeks, each time under a different name, none traceable, prepaid, no driver's license, no social, just a deposit and a P.O. box out of Montgomery. Even stranger, each activation coincided with the exact date of Elise's birthday, July 18th, and the days surrounding it. Someone had been visiting the house every year on the anniversary. When Minton tried to pull the security logs from the utility company, he found a single note on the 1992 entry. Tech reported meter tampered with. Client insisted meter read was accurate. Uncooperative. Closed file. He called the field tech listed. Retired now. Living in Opelika, the man's voice cracked when he answered the phone. I remember that house, he said. I don't remember a client, but I remember the smell. Minton paused. What kind of smell? The line was silent for a long time, like someone had been cooking memories, burning them down to the bones. It was in the walls, an unfinished room. In the attic, behind a panel in the far corner, Minton's team discovered an unfinished room. Rough wood beams, no insulation, no light fixture. Just one bare bulb hanging from a nail in the ceiling. On the floor were 4 items. A melted wax birthday candle, a child's drawing of a house with no doors, a broken piece of a music box, and a photograph of the Morris family, same as the birthday one, but with their eyes scratched out. None of these had been catalogued in the original search. None of them made sense. But the most disturbing part was the back of the photo written in pencil. They never left, they just went quiet. Russell Minton had always believed that most cases weren't solved by genius, but by consistency. You came back, you checked again, you flipped the same photo 4 times until something clicked. That was what he was doing the morning he returned to the station, going through every contact ever listed in the Morris file. There was one name that appeared 3 times, each in different reports. Reverend Isaiah Trent, pastor, St. Agnes Baptist Church from 1975 to 1990. Minton remembered him. A tall man with quiet energy and a stare that made you feel like he'd already heard your confession. The Morris family attended his church every Sunday without fail. Celeste sang in the choir. David helped repair the roof after a storm in '87. Elise and Jaron were part of the children's Bible class, and yet Reverend Trent had never once been officially questioned. The man in the chapel. Minton found him living 45 minutes away in a senior community near Opp, Alabama. The old man answered the door before the bell even finished ringing. Been waiting on you, he said. Took longer than I thought. He hadn't forgotten the Morrises. He hadn't forgotten July 18th either. They came that morning. I remember because Elise wore a blue ribbon, said it was her birthday blessing bow. He smiled faintly, then lost it. Celeste brought lemon pie. David asked if I could come by after the party. Said he wanted to show me something he'd found in the fireplace. Minton blinked. The fireplace? Reverend Trent nodded slowly. Said it wasn't right. Something behind the brick. Said he heard scratching at night. But it wasn't rats, wasn't birds. Said it sounded like someone trying to speak with their mouth full of ash. He never made it to the house that night. When Minton asked why not, Trent paused. I got a call around 6, no one on the other end, just music, church music, but slowed down, wrong somehow. The chords were off, twisted. He looked up at Minton. You ever hear Amazing Grace played backwards, detective? The answering machine. Later that week, while reviewing the log of evidence from Camille Boyd's disappearance, Minton noticed something no one had flagged, a tape cassette recovered from her home. Labeled in red ink, play when it stops. Found inside her answering machine. He played it, static. Then, July 18, 6:41, turn around, then silence, and then, faintly, a child's giggle. Not like one of joy, but like something mimicking joy. The voice didn't match Elise or Jaron. It wasn't anyone from the Morris household. And on the back of the tape, etched in the plastic, were 3 letters. ADM. Behind the staircase. There was one area of the Morris house that had never been properly examined. A wall panel beneath the staircase. In the original blueprints, it was listed as part of a storage crawlspace, but when Minton knocked, it rang hollow. His team removed the drywall carefully. Behind it, a cavity about 4 feet deep, lined with scorched wood, burn marks on every surface. In the center, something wrapped in clear plastic, a bundle of letters postmarked between 1972 and 1975, addressed not to the Morrises, but to a woman named Annabelle DeMarcos. Every envelope was sealed. Minton opened one. The paper was thick, fragile, it read. They say a house holds memory, but it's not true. It holds decision. It holds what we choose to bury, another read. He won't leave until someone listens, and you don't listen with your ears. The last letter in the bundle had no writing, just a single fingerprint in ash, and a rough sketch of the Morris home. Only this version had no chimney, the man in the photographs. On a hunch, Minton brought in an analyst to review the original birthday photograph again. Not the VHS, the still photo found in the attic with the scratched-out eyes. The analyst enhanced it using a process the lab described as incident layering. What they found was subtle. In the back window between two drawn curtains was a shape, a human silhouette. Not one of the four family members. The proportions didn't match. This figure was taller, narrower, and appeared to be standing perfectly still. Worse, in the enhanced negative, you could see that the figure had no face, just the suggestion of a head, shoulders, and long arms. It stood directly behind Elise. You were looking the wrong way. That same week, Minton received a voicemail at the station. No caller ID, no number. A young girl's voice, barely above a whisper. Don't look where they disappeared. Look where they came back. Part 4. There were always four. Russell Minton didn't sleep much anymore. Ever since he listened to that tape, the one from Camille Boyd's answering machine, he had been replaying that phrase in his head. Don't look where they disappeared. Look where they came back. It didn't make sense. No sign of the family had ever been found. Not a footprint, not a blood smear, not a door opened or closed. The only thing that returned was their clothing, and that had somehow survived inside a chimney with no sign of fire or weather damage. And then there was that name again, on the back of the letters hidden in the wall. Annabelle DeMarcos, the woman before. The county clerk's office still had microfiche records from the 1940s. Minton spent half a day hunched over a reader in a basement that smelled like mildew and ghost stories. He found her eventually. DeMarcos, Annabelle, occupant, 132 Collier Road, 1943-1946, age 29, no known relatives, profession private teacher, status unmarried, religion unknown. That was the Morris house. Long before it was theirs, there were 2 entries under her name in the court log. Noise complaint, disturbance, 1944. Health inspection request, odor in walls, 1946. The first one was dismissed, the second had a single note. No findings. Recommend tenant seek psychiatric care. Minton followed the paper trail. She'd been committed in 1947 to Easley Ridge Mental Hospital, about 30 miles north. He drove there the same afternoon. The journal. Annabelle died in 1951, a fall from a second-story window, labeled suicide. But in the hospital's restricted archives, Minton found something most investigators wouldn't know to look for. A box marked unauthenticated writings, handwritten pages, yellowed and brittle. Notes from Annabelle's final year. He read for hours, most were incoherent. Lists of numbers, sketches of a house with eyes instead of windows. But one page stood out. He waits in the mouth of the house. He only opens it when the right names are spoken. When there are 4, it begins. He takes the sound first, then the smell, then the voice, and when the clothes forget the bodies they belong to, he finishes. There was a final line, scrawled in shaky pen. They buried the wrong child. The voice on the tape. Back at the precinct, Minton requested forensic audio enhancement on the voicemail. He didn't tell the tech what to look for, just to clean it and isolate any background patterns. The report came back 3 days later. Embedded beneath the child's whisper were 6 tones, barely audible, irregular, almost like a chime. The tech called it musical residue, likely the artifact of an analog recording with layered reverb. But when Minton ran the pattern through a tonal mapping system, he found something disturbing. The 6 notes exactly matched the doorbell chime from the Morris home. Only one issue, that chime system wasn't installed until 1985, meaning whoever left the voicemail recorded it inside the house. Recently, the witness who never came forward. Minton received a letter 2 weeks after the audio analysis. Typed, no return address, 1 line, I saw them leave. I just couldn't speak, it was unsigned. But the postmark was from Creston Home, a long-term care facility north of Enterprise. He made the drive the next morning. At the front desk the name meant nothing. But when he showed the photo of the Morris family, a nurse hesitated. There's someone here who keeps drawing them, she said. They brought him to room 204. A man in his 80s, nonverbal, sat facing the window. His name was Theodore Blass, a former mail carrier. He lived 3 houses down from the Morrises in the 1980s. Piles of sketches filled the room. All of them showed the same image, a house sometimes surrounded by trees, sometimes floating over water, but always with 4 small silhouettes inside, all facing the wrong way. None of the silhouettes had eyes, the nurse whispered. He draws the same one on his arms sometimes, when he doesn't sleep, on a hunch. Minton turned over one of the earliest sketches, dated 1990. On the back was a phrase written in pencil. I saw them walk out, but their clothes stayed behind the panel beneath the sink. 2 days later, Minton returned to the house. He'd brought no team, just himself, a flashlight, and the letters. It was the smell that led him. A faint trace of something like dust and old flowers. He traced it to the kitchen, specifically beneath the sink. The cabinetry was warped, but the bottom panel popped loose with a crowbar. Inside was a narrow, cloth-wrapped package. He unfolded it slowly. It was a child's diary, faded blue cover, labeled, Elise's book, private. Most pages were innocent. Doodles, birthday countdowns, a list of things she wanted for Christmas. But near the end, the tone changed. The man in the wall says not to tell. He says we're all pretend now. Mommy doesn't blink anymore. Jaren got quiet and the light stopped coming through the windows. The final page. He said I don't need my name anymore. Part 5. The files weren't wrong. The timeline was, by early August of 1996, Detective Russell Minton had exhausted the usual tools, fingerprints, phone logs, bank accounts, witness interviews. All led nowhere. And worse, everything he'd found was starting to conflict. Timelines that didn't add up, records that shouldn't exist. And yet there they were, right where they were supposed to be. One detail refused to sit still. In the original police report from 1988, it was stated that the Morris family had last been seen by neighbor Marla Glenn at approximately 6:25 p.m. She'd allegedly waved to them as she was unloading groceries. But in a newly uncovered statement, dated 3 days after the disappearance, she claimed she hadn't seen them at all, not that day, not even the week before. Minton had both reports, same signature, same handwriting, different memory, and that's when he noticed the timestamp on the original statement. It was typed on a machine that didn't exist until 1990, the basement room at County Records. He drove to the Geneva County Records office, not the main one, but the off-site storage facility, the kind you only learn about from a clerk who trusts you and thinks the system is broken. A retired archivist named Howard Kellner let him in. Be careful down there, he warned. Some of those files weren't meant to be seen again. The room was windowless, damp. Fluorescent lights flickered in pairs. Minton scanned until he found a box labeled, Missing Persons, Closed, 1980-1989. Inside, among the faded manila folders, was one that stood out. No markings, no label, just a single page clipped to a Polaroid. The photo showed a young black girl standing in the corner of a kitchen. Not Elise, but similar age, maybe 6 or 7, wearing a white dress with 2 vertical red stripes. The kitchen had an old radio, a pink fridge, and above her, an open vent. The note on the back read, DeMarco's residence, 1945, child ID unknown, no follow-up. Minton stared at it for a long time. It wasn't possible. The photo had been taken in the same house, the same wallpaper, the same corner, but that kitchen had been renovated in the early 1980s, meaning this photo from 1945 was taken after the renovation. The phone call from 1989. That same week, the precinct received a ping from A.T. Alabama. The duration, 16 seconds, no voice, just faint static, and a sound like wind through leaves. The number it connected to, a former church office, vacant since 1992. That church, St. Agnes Baptist. Minton drove up the next day. The building was padlocked. Weeds crawled through cracks in the sidewalk. But inside, dust undisturbed, he found the office and the landline, still plugged in. The receiver had a single ash-colored fingerprint on the 6 key, Elise's voice again. The team at Audio Forensics had been working independently on the birthday VHS tape, digitizing the frame-by-frame track. It wasn't just the image that had been distorted. The audio track itself contained ghost harmonics, frequencies outside normal vocal range, spiking just before the camera cut off. When those harmonics were isolated and slowed to 10% speed, a pattern emerged. Not words, but humming, a melody, familiar. When Minton heard it, he froze. It was You Are My Sunshine. Elise had sung it once during a Sunday service just a week before she disappeared. The tone was perfect, too perfect, like it had been sampled and looped, as if the sound itself had been preserved, but not the voice, the hidden room that wasn't there. Guided by the anomalies in the photo archives, Minton requested an updated ground-penetrating radar scan of the Morris house, specifically the space beneath the kitchen and staircase. The scanner showed something impossible, a cavity that shouldn't exist, roughly 8 by 10 feet, no door, no air vent, surrounded by foundation walls on all sides. There had been no mention of it in any previous blueprint, no record in construction files, yet it was clearly there. The team broke ground 2 days later. What they found wasn't a room, it was a pit, a depression in the earth lined with cement, layered in soot. In the center, a metal object, a melted tin music box half buried inside a voice chip. They played it. Mommy, I can't see anymore. It's too full in here. The voice was Elise's. The house knows the date. That night, Minton received a final letter. No return address, no stamps, just slid beneath his office door, typed on thin paper, aged at the edges. He doesn't care where they went, he only cares when they were. That house doesn't keep people, it keeps time. You are asking the wrong question. Stop asking what happened to the Morris family, start asking when. Part 6. You don't leave a place like that. You fade from it. By the end of August, Russell Minton stopped trying to sleep. He started parking outside the Morris house just after sunset. Not officially, not on the record. Just him, a notebook, a thermos of black coffee, and a 9mm tucked beneath the seat. He would watch the windows. Most nights were quiet. A flicker of wind, the sound of insects. A silence so deep you could hear the trees lean, but on the third night he saw it, movement. Second floor. Elise's room. A shadow, small, quick, then gone. He entered the house immediately. No signs of entry, no footprints, no shift in temperature. But the bear on Elise's shelf, the one missing one eye, had been turned. Not fully. Just enough to face the door. Minton stared at it. He hadn't told anyone about that bear, the tape that shouldn't exist. A package arrived at the precinct, no postage, no markings. Just placed on Minton's desk during his brief absence. Inside, a mini DV cassette, format not used in the 1980s. Handwritten label. Return copy July 18, 1988, 6:41 p.m. The team set up playback in the media room. The footage was shaky, silent. But it was the same birthday scene, the same room, same decorations, same family. Only now the camera was placed in a different position. This time, the footage was taken from the hallway, looking into the living room through a barely open door. The entire family is there, laughing. But something is off. Their eyes, none of them blink. They smile and hold the smile too long. At exactly 6:41, every member of the family turns their head at the same time, looking directly toward the camera, toward the hallway, toward whoever is holding the second camera. The screen flickers, then cuts to black. The missing interview. In revisiting the Camille Boyd case, Minton discovered an odd reference in her file. Interview with H. Coates, July 22, 1996. No transcript. No recording, no physical file, just a note, filed under special review, he called archives. No record. So he tracked down Henry Coates himself, a retired EMT who responded to the scene when Camille vanished. Coates was hesitant to talk. Then finally he said, "She wasn't alone when we found the car." Minton blinked. "Excuse me?" There was a man standing on the front porch, thin, tall, gray suit, just watching. I called out, no response. By the time I blinked, he was gone. He paused. "But that's not the part that stayed with me." Minton waited, the air around him. It didn't move. "You were never supposed to find this." 2 nights later, while reviewing the timeline board in his office, Minton noticed something new, a pin that hadn't been there before. A note stuck with a yellow tack. He hadn't written it. Typed, all caps. "She isn't stuck in 1988, she's just being remembered there." Below it, a blurry photograph, recent, of Elise, standing on the side of a road, barefoot, wearing the same pink dress. A shadow behind her, hand reaching forward, cropped at the wrist. There was no metadata, no location data, nothing in the precinct camera logs. The house begins to speak. That week, Minton stayed inside the house. He brought bedding, food, a camera with motion sensors. He tried to document everything. For 48 hours, nothing. Then the third night it started. 3:12 a.m., the radio in the kitchen turned on. No electricity, no batteries. It played a slowed version of "You Are My Sunshine." Then silence. 3:47 a.m. The bathroom mirror cracked from the inside. No one touched it. 4:06 a.m. The front door clicked open by itself. Not wide, just enough to let something in, or out. There were always 4. Minton awoke at dawn, lying on the living room floor. The notebook he'd used for months, all case notes, was beside him. Open to the middle, new handwriting had been added, not his. There were always 4. The house doesn't take people, it replaces them. On the opposite page, a charcoal sketch. The Morris family again, only their faces had been replaced by clocks, each stuck at 6:41. Russell Minton wasn't sleeping anymore, not for lack of trying. It wasn't just the Morris house that kept him awake now. It was what it had started doing to his mind. He'd always been sharp, linear, a thinker with a badge, but lately he couldn't track how many days had passed since the Chimney discovery. His notebooks had conflicting entries. Some were in his handwriting. Others looked like it, just slightly off. The loops of his G's were wrong. The S leaned left instead of right. And then there were the dates, timestamps from weeks that didn't exist, days that fell out of order. In 3 different notebooks, written on separate pages in different pens, he'd found the same sentence repeated, one he didn't remember writing. "You don't leave a place like that. You fade from it." On the 5th night in the Morris house, Minton began marking the doors with chalk. Just a simple horizontal line, front door, closet, kitchen, pantry. the narrow crawlspace door beneath the stairs. He counted 5 when he woke the next morning, lying on the living room floor, sweating and disoriented. There were 6. The 6th mark was on the mirror in the upstairs hallway. Not the mirror itself, but just behind it. He pried it off the wall and found a narrow vertical slit in the plaster, 4 feet high, no knob, hinged, a hidden door inside a crawlspace. The air was thick with clay, old glue, and something that smelled like burned paper. No real floor, just support beams and loose insulation. In the center of the space sat a reel-to-reel audio recorder, plugged into nothing, yet its wheels were slowly turning. He crouched and pressed play. A child's voice filled the crawlspace. It wasn't Elise's, or maybe it was, but older, weathered. "I see you now," the voice said. "You came back different. Mommy says you weren't always you. He made you inside out." Later that afternoon, he found a photograph tucked inside an old book in the attic. The cover was warped with moisture. The pages smelled of iron and mildew, but between them, a Polaroid. On the back, July 19, 1988, the photo showed a man standing near the living room window. It was him. Same build, same posture, same hand resting on the sill, but that was impossible. He hadn't joined the Geneva County Force until 1991. He had never been inside that house until this case, hadn't he? In Selma, Virginia, Flax had waited for him without knowing he was coming. She was 93, thin and quiet, and the sketchbook on her lap looked like it weighed more than she did. She didn't speak right away, just flipped through page after page of drawings. Always the house, the same angle, the same sagging porch. But every page had subtle differences: curtains half open, doorways narrower, shadows bending inward. One drawing stood out, the Morris house. Behind it, a figure, charcoal, limbs too long, arms spread wide, no face, just the idea of one waiting. "He doesn't live there," she whispered, tracing the line of its body. "He is the house back at the precinct." Minton reviewed the calendar he'd found behind the wall, the one spanning from 1943 to 1996, every year filled with scribbles, circles, and names. Dates tied to disappearances: April 3, 1951, November 29, 1962, July 18, 1988. 4 people, each time, always 4. But in the box for 1975, there was only a black X, and in the top right corner, scrawled in faded graphite, "Too many came back wrong." The mini DV tape showed the birthday again. The same decorations, same setting, but now filmed from a different angle, from the hallway. Watching through a crack in the door, the family stood around the cake, unmoving. Their faces were fixed in smiles that didn't fade. And then, slowly, all 4 turned to face the camera, not the one filming, the one watching. They didn't speak. But their lips moved. Minton replayed it 5 times, zoomed in, slowed it down. "You came back wrong." At 2:13 a.m. on September 4th, the precinct radio picked up a signal. FM 97.8, a frequency no one had used in decades. The voice on the tape was a girl's, but older, detached. "Can I come out now?" she asked. "Is it over? I've been learning my new lines. You said I'd get to be real if I waited." Then a pause. "He said your name today." "He said you're next." The call came 3 nights later. "Block number, Detective Minton," the voice said, calm and low. "I was wondering when you'd come back." "Who is this?" Minton asked. "You don't remember me yet." "That's okay. You will soon. Where are you calling from?" A pause, and then from upstairs. His hands trembled, but he went anyway. He had to. He had to see for himself. The house was silent. The hallway upstairs was even darker than usual. Elise's door was open. Inside, nothing had moved. The same furniture, the same ripped curtain. But something felt wrong with the air. It wasn't stale. It was too still, like a held breath. And then he saw it, a figure, standing in the middle of the room. His height, his build, same face, same clothes, badge, notepad in left hand, but it wasn't breathing. Minton took 1 step closer. The figure tilted its head, smiled first, then spoke, with his own voice. "Stay." He couldn't move. He couldn't breathe. The mirror behind the figure flickered. Not light. Something else. Movement. Minton didn't look away. He couldn't, because the face in the mirror wasn't his anymore, and it was blinking. By mid-September, Minton had stopped asking the usual questions. He no longer wondered who left the letters, or why Elise's voice was recorded on radio bands that shouldn't exist. He wasn't looking for suspects, not really. He was looking for a pattern, or at least a rhythm. Something that would explain why time, not people, seemed to be the primary victim of this case. He spent 5 nights outside the house, just watching. The 6th night he went back inside, not to investigate, just to listen. The house was quiet, still, but it wasn't empty. That much he felt in his bones. In the upstairs hallway, the floorboards groaned a second before he stepped on them, as if they remembered his weight. The door to Elise's room opened before he touched the handle. Inside, nothing had changed. But something was wrong with the air, too dense. like it had been waiting. That's when he noticed the sound. It was coming from behind the closet wall. A slow, rhythmic scrape. He followed it, not physically, but intuitively. There was no access panel, no secret latch, just drywall and plaster. Still, he pressed his hand against it, and the scraping stopped. Then 3 sharp knocks from the inside. Minton stepped back, heart racing. No one should have been there, no one could be. But then the wall spoke, not a voice, not in the traditional sense. The vibration of the knocks somehow formed into a word in his mind. It said, "You." The next morning, Minton went to retrieve a copy of the original search warrant filed in 1988. The file was sealed, but inside the records room, he found something odd. The page listing the responding officers was different than what he remembered. One name was crossed out, slashed with red ink. R.T. Minton. He stared at it. His own name written in official report logs, 3 years before he ever joined the department. Before he was even certified. It made no sense, except it did. Because he was beginning to remember, not facts, not events, but fragments, an image of himself. Standing in that house, sunlight cutting through the kitchen window. The sound of a birthday candle being blown out. The moment a girl, small, in a pink dress, looked up at him and said, "It's okay, you were just gone too long." He had thought it was a dream, but now he wasn't sure. 2 days later, a construction crew working on a property 2 blocks from the Morris house uncovered an old time capsule embedded beneath a concrete slab. Something clearly not part of their original blueprint. Inside were a worn-out church hymnal from the 1950s, a box of unused birthday candles, a cassette tape labeled "Listen" on the 6th day, a page from a child's diary. The page wasn't signed, but the handwriting matched Elise's. Minton confirmed it himself. "He made us say the lines again. But I forgot some of mine. He says the room is still watching. He says there's one of Daddy in the basement now, too. But he doesn't talk right." The cassette contained only one sound: breathing, then a whisper. "She's almost done remembering." That night, Minton stayed in the house again. He brought with him only 2 things, his recorder and the old photograph of himself dated July 19, 1988. At 3:13 a.m., he heard movement from the kitchen. He followed it in silence. The air had a scent like burnt sugar. The wallpaper looked more peeled than before, or older. When he entered the kitchen, he saw her. Elise, or someone who looked like her. She was facing the sink, hair the same, dress the same. But she didn't move, didn't breathe. He took a step forward, slowly, whispered, "Elise." She turned, but it wasn't a turn, it was a shift. As if the room rearranged itself and placed her in a new orientation. Her face looked at him. But her eyes weren't eyes anymore, they were clocks, and they were ticking. 6:41. He blinked. She was gone. The room was empty again. 3 days later, the forensic team received an anonymous envelope. No return address, no note, just a photograph. It showed a group of people sitting at a dinner table, 4 chairs. 3 filled. One of the faces was Minton's. Same suit, same tired eyes, his badge visible on the table. The other 2 were harder to make out, blurred, almost melted around the edges. One wore a yellow dress, the other a boy's striped shirt. The 4th chair, empty. On the back of the photo, "One seat is always waiting." At this point, Minton started losing time. His captain found him one afternoon sitting at his desk, staring at the same page for what must have been 2 hours. When asked what he was doing, Minton simply said, "Waiting for the next loop." He didn't explain. He didn't need to. The camera footage in the records room showed him entering and exiting at times that didn't exist. 2:67 a.m., 13:41 p.m., he hadn't been clocked in. But what finally broke him wasn't time, it was recognition. Inside the chimney, buried deeper than the soot-stained clothing, beneath the torn pink dress and the striped boy's shirt, they found a second birthday cake. Melted, collapsed, but real, and inside it, buried at the very center, wrapped in wax paper, was a small metal badge, his badge number 1432, but the alloy was wrong, older. The engraving was stylized in a font the department hadn't used since 1966. On the back, etched into the metal, "You're finally back. Try to stay this time." Russell Minton no longer believed in solving anything. He didn't quit, didn't retire, but something inside him had gone quiet. The way a man stops praying in a church, not because he's angry, but because he suspects the silence might be the real answer. By late September, his office remained untouched, but the precinct slowly stopped assigning him anything new. People started walking past him instead of greeting him. Not out of disrespect, more like he'd become part of the furniture, a fixture. Familiar, motionless, his badge stayed on his desk now. He didn't wear it, not because he didn't think he was a detective anymore, but because it no longer mattered when he was one. On the 24th of September, he received an envelope, delivered by hand. No return address. Inside, a single page torn from a ledger. On it, a typed note. Return the key. Before 6:41 there was no key inside. That night he returned to the Morris house. The air was cooler. The cicadas had gone quiet. In the living room, he noticed something strange. The VHS tape from the original birthday party was gone. Not misplaced, just gone. In its place sat a folded piece of lined paper. They only disappear when you remember them too late. The next morning he received a call from a retired clerk named Wendell Ferguson, who had worked in county records during the late 70s. Wendell asked if he was still working the Collier Road case. Minton hesitated, then said yes. Wendell asked him to meet at a small diner in Andalusia, halfway between nothing and nowhere. When Minton arrived, the man was already seated, holding an old file folder. Inside, a set of photographs, low quality, black and white, taken from what looked like a church balcony. They showed a group of 4 standing in front of the pulpit. A man, woman, boy, and girl. Not the Morris family, not yet. But the girl had Elisa's face, only younger. Under the photo was a receipt, dated March 12, 1977. The photographer, Russell T. Minton. The caption read, "Family number 4 arrangement complete." Back at the house, Minton did something he hadn't done since the beginning. He sat in the living room, just sat. No recorder, no flashlight, just his eyes, his breath, his body inside the shape of the place. And he noticed it again, the ticking, faint, almost shy, but constant. He followed it upstairs. In the hallway mirror, the frame had begun to warp. The wood seemed older now, more brittle. The glass was fogged from within. Though the house was dry, he pressed his fingers to the surface. The ticking stopped. Then, faintly, not sound but sensation, he felt a whisper in the bone of his finger. "You're back early this time, downstairs." The phone rang. But the house had no line. He picked it up anyway. "Detective Minton," the voice said. It was a child, calm, patient. "You didn't forget us this time." He didn't speak, the voice continued. "You're closer now, but you still haven't remembered your part. Do you want a clue?" He closed his eyes, yes. A pause, then, "Go to the fireplace, kneel, and look up." He did. For the first time since the beginning, he entered the space fully, crawled inside, pressed his knees into the ash, bent back his head, looked into the black throat of the chimney. Something glinted. He reached up, hand trembling, and felt it. Cold, metal, small. A key. He pulled it down. Attached was a tag. 132 Collier Road, basement room. But the house had no basement, or so they'd thought. He paced every wall, tapped, knocked, counted steps. And then, just past the pantry, behind the old shelving, he saw it, a hairline seam in the wall, not drywall, concrete, but with just enough give to suggest a doorway. He pried it open. A narrow set of stairs led downward, deeper than any foundation plan had ever shown. The air smelled like chalk and heat and something vaguely electrical. He descended slowly, and at the bottom a door. The key fit. Inside the room was a replica, a perfect recreation of the Morris living room. Same couch, same wallpaper, same faded decorations from a party that never ended, and seated on the couch him, younger, maybe 10 years, holding a toy badge in one hand, smiling. "Hey," the boy said, "you made it this time." Russell tried to speak, but no sound came out. "You always come late," the boy said, "but this time you're early. That's good. That's progress." "Who are you?" Minton finally managed. The boy stood, walked slowly to the center of the room, gestured around. "This is how it starts. The house, the birthday, the family, the forgetting, the search. You." Again and again, he walked to the fireplace, the fake one this time, put his small hand inside and pulled out 4 paper dolls, held them out. "Every time we try to make them fit," the boy said. Minton stepped closer. "Why?" he asked. The boy smiled. "Because one of them is always wrong. And one of them is always you." Outside, the wind began to rise. Inside, Minton reached for the dolls. But the moment his fingers touched the paper, the walls of the room shivered, not shook, shivered, like something breathing out through the floorboards, and the boy stepped back into the shadow of the fireplace and was gone. Minton stood alone now. The room was silent. He looked down. The paper dolls were still in his hand, but now there were 5, and none of them had faces. The 5 paper dolls in Russell Minton's hand were blank, no faces, no features. Just outlines, arms out, legs straight. Silhouettes of people he'd followed, chased, imagined, tried to resurrect. 4 he knew. The 5th, he didn't. Or maybe he did, but had never had the words to say it aloud. He looked up from the dolls. The basement replica of the Morris living room was empty again. The air was warm. Too warm, like a room that had been closed for decades but remembered bodies inside it. He stepped back toward the door, but there was none. The key he had no longer fit the lock. He reached for the wall where the stairwell had been, but it was solid now. Not a seam, not a groove, just foundation. He wasn't trapped. he was returned. Above him, the house creaked in the rhythm of breath, a slow, shallow inhale. The way old homes settle or speak. He sat down, placed the dolls on the carpet, and waited. Minutes passed, then hours, no sound, no movement, but then, from the corner of the room, he heard the television turn on. Static flickering blue, the screen showed a familiar scene, the Morris family, gathered around the birthday cake. The photo they'd taken before disappearing, but this time, there was someone else in the frame, standing behind them just outside the banner. A man in plain clothes, his posture tilted, his expression unreadable, but his face, it was Russell Minton's. He watched the tape in silence. Then the girl, Elise, turned in the footage and looked directly at the camera. Not at whoever was filming, at him. "You left again," she said. "You always do. But it's okay." He stepped forward. Her face filled the screen. "You don't remember the first time," she continued. "But I do." The screen flickered. "You said you'd help." The static thickened, warping the image. "You said you wouldn't let it happen again." Russell dropped to his knees. Not in grief, not in panic, in recognition. He understood now. There was no timeline, there was no beginning, no end, only echoes. He had always been part of this. Not as investigator, not as savior, but as the loop itself. The house didn't trap people, it remembered them. And in its remembering it reshaped them. He picked up the paper dolls again. One of them, now, had eyes, 2 ink dots barely there, the smallest face smiling. He blinked. The room around him flickered, wallpaper faded further. The carpet thinned. The ceiling dipped, and for the first time since this began, he saw them again, the family. Not in ghostly flashes, not in spectral form, but seated around him. David, the father, still in his tan shirt. Marie, the mother, hands folded calmly. Daniel, striped shirt slightly torn. Elise, pink dress glowing faintly in the dark. They looked at him, not with joy, not with fear, with understanding, as if they had waited a long time for him to stop pretending he wasn't part of them. Elise stood, walked over, placed something in his hand. It was his badge, the old one, number 1432. Burned slightly around the edges. She smiled. "You always come back when it's time." Russell closed his eyes. When he opened them again, he was sitting at his desk at the precinct, fluorescent lights, quiet chatter, paperwork in front of him, his nameplate still on the door. Det R. Minton. A knock at the frame. A young officer peeked in. "Nervous, sir, there's a call. Missing persons report. Family of 4. Disappeared last night. House on Collier Road." Russell nodded, reached for his coat, checked his badge, still warm, still burned. He walked past the mirror by the exit and paused just for a second. His reflection blinked twice, then smiled, and somewhere, far beneath the house, the reel-to-reel machine turned one final time, ticked to 6:41, and stopped.